All right. So suppose that you believe me that it's true. The world is less violent. The world is getting better. Better. But, as you well know, past trends are not guarantees. I'll spell guarantee now. Guarantees of future trends. So, you would be foolish if you just bought stocks that were increasing in value. Because just because it has increased in value doesn't mean it will in the future. Well, it's the same here. Just because the world has been getting better, it doesn't mean that it will get better in the future. And in fact, many people are worried that populism in particular is making a comeback. So, Donald Trump, all these the Dansk Folk Party are becoming more popular. There's a Swedish party as well that's a populist party that seems to have been doing well in elections. Authoritarianism's coming back. We've got China, which has been the country that has sort of become or has grown the most in terms of both the economy and also power in the last 30 years. It's not a democracy, it's an authoritarian state. We have dictators like Putin and Erdogan in Turkey is a place that used to be more democratic. It's now more of a dictatorship. It seems like a time when the world is becoming more authoritarian. Okay, is that something that we're going to see happening more in the future? Do these gains that I've shown you, are these things that we might expect to stop? Well, the first thing is, and fair enough, this is going back to 1800, democracy has actually been increasing around the world, especially up here until 1920. And there's a fall, right? This is the rise of fascism. Then there's a rise again after World War II, right? Germany, Italy become democracies again. And then there's a fall again down here. This is the Soviet Union and Soviet states. And then this is now sort of the rise of the end of the Soviet Union and the post-Soviet states, which are democratic. So it turns out that actually countries are tending to become more democratic over time, not less. And that's even true in the face of rising dictatorships like Putin in Russia and Erdogan in Turkey. Moreover, if we think about values that we tend to associate with Western countries, so these are emancipated values, women are equal to men, and things like people should be allowed to choose their own religion, things like that. These are often associated with the West, but you can see that all over the world, countries have become more and more people in countries actually sort of increasingly believe in these sort of emancipative values. I read something interesting recently where they were talking about how we justify sort of moral arguments. It turns out that mostly people have become more consequentialist. What's important isn't what you do, it's the consequences of what you do. So for instance, when people were arguing against slavery in the 19th century, they'd say the reason why slavery is good or bad or okay or not okay is because God said so. God said it was bad, so that's why it's bad. God said it was good, so that's why it's okay. These days, people are much more likely to argue from something like, slavery is bad because, it treats people in a way that's totally abhorrent. Right? That's why it's bad. It's not because of anything that God said. It's because of the consequences. It's something that you wouldn't even realize it because we've imbibed it so deeply as a culture. And I think that's kind of spreading around the world. Human rights, so more mixed. This is since 1945. So here's how much human rights are protected in the world. Well, it has been increasing a little bit, not particularly. I don't know if it's statistically significant actually from this increase. Norway certainly is doing well. China maybe not so well, right? So we had this drop. This is the Cultural Revolution in China, where things were very, very bad for a while. Somewhat better into the 1980s, but then also a recent drop with the Chinese treatment of minorities. North Korea as well, going down. South Korea's going up. So this is more of a mixed bag, I would say. Here's one that's very important, education. So all over the world, people are getting more educated. I mean, people couldn't read, right? Here's the fraction of adults with a basic education. You could think about that as being able to read, do basic arithmetic. In the world in 1820, it was 1/5 of the people. In the world in 2010, it's almost 4/5 of the people. I'd say a little bit under maybe, but close. Almost 4/5 of the people. And in particular, outside of basically sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, it's even higher. But really all over the world, and the growth has been incredible all over. And here's years of schooling in different countries, the same story. So, why is this important? It's because people that are educated tend to have more of these emancipative values. Once you can read, once you learn about the world out there, you're more likely to think that other people also have feelings, and what happens to them is important for you as well. So, another example, how about homosexual decriminalization? 1790, there were almost 0 countries that had decriminalized homosexuality. It was illegal almost everywhere. And here in 2015, it's almost, this is number of countries, right? So this is 90 countries of the 200 some countries in the world. So this is 1/3 of the countries have decriminalized homosexuality. Still seems kind of low, but there you go. And then you can measure populism in various ways. You might say that it's just that, so this is showing that later cohorts. So here's the birth cohort. It's showing that later birth cohorts tend to get less and less populist. It's basically people that were born earlier are more likely to vote for Brexit, Trump, and other European populist parties. This is saying that values are sort of becoming more emancipative as time goes by, as generations die off, essentially. But then it's even showing that here's something kind of interesting. People do actually get more conservative. I should be careful here. Yeah, that's right. So this is a cool graph because it shows 2 things. Okay. On the x-axis here we have the birth year. Okay, so this is the year that people were born. And over here on the y-axis we have the emancipative values index. So again, sort of thinking things like women should have equal rights with men and things like that. How much do you care about other people's liberty, even if they disagree with you, type of thing. So these are, again, Western type values. And we have 2 tests. One happened in 2005. One happened in 1980. Of course, in 2005, you couldn't test, in 1980, you couldn't test Gen X's and millennials because millennials hadn't been born yet and Gen X's were just kids. Okay, so that's why this line stops here. And here, you can't test people that were born in the GI generation that ended in 1924 because by 2005, most of them were dead. So what we see here is 2 changes. One, these lines are kind of parallel, but there's a shift up. So what this says is that even within the baby boomer generation, people born in 1950, when they were tested in 1980, they had less emancipative values than they did when they were tested in 2005. So within a generation, there's actually a rise in emancipative values. So within people's lifetimes, they're actually becoming more and more more and more respectful of other people's situations, if you like, or Western values. So that's one thing. The second thing is the reason that these lines are trending upwards. What this says is that as generations go by, generations themselves are also sort of, each generation is more sort of believes in these emancipative values than the last generation. So there's 2 things going on here. One is that as people get older, as time goes by, their generation is becoming more emancipative, and then also each new generation is itself more emancipative. So in two different dimensions, this is happening. Okay, so I think this is the last one I have. Let me just finish it up. So, that might all be fine. So what have we shown? The world so far has been getting better. Even though it looks like, in the news we read about all this stuff about how, dictatorships are rising, there's more and more populism, it actually seems like things are becoming more consistent with the type of liberal values that we associate with this previous period of growth. Okay, but why does it matter if we're all just as miserable as before, right? A hedonic treadmill. Are people really any happier with more stuff? Well, let's see. Well, the first thing to note is that if we look at some sort of well-being composite, okay, so what could that be? A composite of things like length of your life, things that we associate with well-being. The cleanliness of your country. Another one, human development. How much education do people get? This sort of thing. We can see that these things are going up over time. So this isn't quite the same as happiness, but it's things that are consistent with quality of life. Okay, they tend to be going up as time has gone by, as people got richer as well. Here now we're going to actually look at income. So this is real GDP per capita on a log scale, and here's life satisfaction. So now we're actually going to ask you, how happy are you? Okay, and what we see is there's a strong upward slanting trend here. So countries that are richer per capita tend to also report higher life satisfaction, right? And then you can see there's all these arrows within particular countries. These are showing you that over time, these countries are both getting happier, so they're going up this direction as they get richer. So the richer countries are, even within a country, the happier they get. So kind of a famous result here, by the way, is that these Latin American countries, Venezuela, Brazil, Mexico, they're happier than you'd expect based on their income, right? So here's kind of what you'd expect. Here's the same income, and then here's maybe the expectation, right? So Latin American countries are happier than you'd expect, whereas Asian countries, East Asian countries, tend to be less happy than you'd expect. So there's Hong Kong. What else do I see in here? Well, that's what it is. I don't know. This must be Latvia. The sulking Baltics. Neither here nor there. The point is that as people get richer, both within a country and then across countries, people are also reporting higher happiness levels. Loneliness, people feel like, modern society, it's more individual, people are more and more lonely. If you actually go and try to measure this, people have this is in the United States, and it's been measured since 1978 on some sort of index of loneliness. Loneliness is actually going down over time. 2012. Suicides, at least they're not going up, they're not really going down. The famous one is the United States. You might say, why is it that suicides are going down in England and Switzerland, but staying constant in the United States? Well, until recently, people said it was the proliferation of guns in the United States. Switzerland also has a lot of guns. But then this one here is actually the opioid crisis. So people are taking a lot of opioids, getting addicted, and sadly, many of them are dying. So, we can measure U.S. happiness as what percentage of people report that they're very happy. This, if anything, has maybe been going down a little bit since 1970 when it started to be measured. But in the other direction, I'm not sure if it's statistically significant, but here the same thing, a slight increase in people that report life is exciting. So if they're getting less happy, at least they think that life is a little bit more exciting. All right, so let me just stop there.